This section gives an overview of the key version control and team collaboration concepts in the Rational Team Concert Eclipse client for source code and artifacts. It takes you through a use case of accessing files from an RTC stream, bringing those files into a local sandbox, making changes to those files, and then uploading them back into the stream where they can be accessed by other team members. Let's first define the organization of RTC. The highest level of organization in RTC is the project area. There are multiple RTC project areas on the Jazz Team server. Users will not be able to create project areas. Those will be created by the ALM team. But once created, team members can act as project administrators, and they can give access to the project area to other members on their team. The project area contains one or more streams. Streams are RTC repository objects with one or more components. Stream corresponds to a view in Star Team. Components are a group of related artifacts under version control. We could have a component for documentation, or a component for database code or Java code. Components can be reused, and a stream will have one or more components. So now let's take a look at how a team member, Bob, wants to get files from the stream into his local Eclipse workspace. The first thing Bob needs to do is to create a repository workspace. And a repository workspace is a server-side RTC object that is associated with a specific user. A repository workspace has a flow target. The flow target is usually a stream, but it can also be another repository workspace. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So to get the files from the stream to our local Eclipse file system, we need to create a repository workspace that flows to the stream. So Bob will, after creating the repository workspace, loads the files from the stream into the repository workspace, which puts them into the sandbox. And a sandbox is an RTC entity that corresponds to a local directory on the file system. In the RTC Eclipse client, the sandbox corresponds to the Eclipse workspace, but you can point it to another location on the file system if you want. Once the files are loaded, you can edit the file or files in your sandbox. After editing, you save the files locally. To get the new version of the files back to the stream, Bob goes to the Pending Changes view, which is a view in the Eclipse client. The Pending Changes view shows you the relationship between what is in the repository workspace compared to what is in the stream and what is in the sandbox. When you go to the Pending Changes view, you see the Unresolved folder. This is visible because Bob just made a local change. The Unresolved folder shows you that you have local changes, but those changes have not been checked into the repository workspace. The action of moving the changes from the sandbox to the repository workspace is a check-in. Once checked in, the file or files go into the outgoing folder in the Pending Changes view and are bundled into a change set. A change set is the mechanism of delivering the files from the repository workspace to the stream. To get the change set from the repository workspace to the stream, the action is a deliver. Deliver takes the change set and delivers it to the stream where it can be accessed by other members of the team. After Bob delivers his changes, Joe, a team member, sees Bob's incoming changes in his Pending Changes view. They show up in the incoming folder. Joe accepts the incoming change set into his repository workspace, which loads them into his sandbox where he can work on them. There's one more thing to talk about. We talked about flow targets and how repository workspaces usually flow to the stream, but they can also flow to another repository workspace. For example, if Bob and Joe are both working on a feature at the same time, and that feature involved working on the same set of code, they might not want to deliver the code to the stream because there may be conflicts. Bob can point his repository workspace to Joe's repository workspace, and they can merge any conflicts before delivering them to the stream. So Bob can then test the merge results locally before delivering. There are other situations where you might point a repository workspace to another repository workspace, but the point here is to show that repository workspaces can have flow targets other than streams.